Sometimes a stranger bleeds for your child before you even learn her name. The first crack sounded like thunder above the ballroom, sharp, violent, and wrong. Every conversation inside the Grand Marquette Hotel stopped. Crystal glasses freezing halfway to painted lips while 100 wealthy people tilted their heads toward the ceiling. I looked up automatically, one hand still balancing a silver tray against my hip, and saw the enormous chandelier sway above the center of the ballroom. Thousands of glass pieces shimmered under golden light like diamonds hanging by a thread. My chest tightened. Something was wrong. The orchestra had stopped playing. Even the violinists looked nervous. "Marin," my manager hissed beside me, grabbing my elbow hard enough to sting. "Move. Table 9 needs champagne." I nodded quickly even though my pulse had started racing. My black waitress uniform felt too tight around my ribs as I crossed the marble floor between Manhattan's elite. Men in tailored tuxedos laughed too loudly beside women wrapped in gowns that probably cost more than my car. The scent of expensive perfume mixed with champagne and candle smoke until the air itself felt heavy. I kept my eyes lowered. That was the rule at places like this: serve quietly, smile politely. Pretend you do not hear things rich people never wanted overheard. Another crack echoed overhead, louder this time. A few guests glanced upward nervously before forcing uncomfortable smiles back onto their faces. Rich people hated scenes almost as much as they hated fear. I reached table 9 just as the ballroom doors opened. The temperature in the room changed. You could feel it before you even saw him. Conversations softened. Security guards near the walls straightened. Even the hotel staff stopped moving. Lucien Devereaux entered the ballroom like he owned the oxygen inside it. Tall, with broad shoulders beneath a perfectly fitted black suit. Dark hair brushed back from a face too sharp and controlled to belong to an ordinary man. He looked somewhere around 38, but there was something older in his eyes, something cold and dangerous, the kind of man people stepped aside for without realizing they were doing it. Two men in dark suits followed several feet behind him, scanning the ballroom. But Lucien was not looking at the guests. His attention stayed fixed on the small boy walking silently beside him. Theo Devereaux looked tiny compared to his father, maybe 8 years old, pale skin, dark hair, gray sweater beneath a miniature navy blazer. He stared at the floor while the crowd watched them like royalty entering a cathedral. He never smiled, not once. Lucien rested one hand against the boy's shoulder as they crossed the ballroom together, and for a second, that gesture hit me strangely hard, protective, careful, human. Then it vanished behind that icy expression again. I lowered my gaze fast before he caught me staring. Eyes down. Another waitress whispered beside me nervously. "That is Devereaux," she whispered, like I did not know. Everyone in New York knew the name Devereaux. Real estate, shipping, investments, rumors, always rumors. I picked up another tray of champagne from the catering station, trying to ignore the uneasy feeling crawling beneath my skin. The chandelier above us groaned softly again. This time I heard metal. My head snapped upward. One of the support cables had started separating near the ceiling beam. Tiny glass crystals trembled violently overhead. Nobody else seemed to notice yet. Nobody except me. Then my eyes found Theo standing alone beneath the chandelier, while Lucien turned toward one of his security men across the ballroom. The little boy never looked up, and the cable snapped. The world moved faster than thought. 1 second Theo Devereaux stood beneath that chandelier, staring down at the marble floor silently. The next, the ceiling exploded above him. Women screamed. Glass shattered through the ballroom like icy rain. I dropped the champagne tray so fast the silver crashed against the floor beside me, but I barely heard it over the sound coming from above. The chandelier was falling directly toward the little boy. My body reacted before my brain did. I ran. My shoes slipped against the polished marble as guests stumbled backward in panic around me. Somebody grabbed my arm, yelling something I could not understand, but I pulled free and lunged toward Theo just as the first wave of crystal crashed downward. I wrapped both arms around him and drove us sideways across the floor. Then something slammed across my back hard enough to steal the air from my lungs. Pain burst through my shoulders in a hot, blinding wave. Sharp, heavy, endless. More glass shattered around us, skidding across marble while people screamed and security rushed forward. Theo curled against my chest without making a sound. I could feel him shaking beneath my arms, my vision blurred. For one terrifying second, I thought I might black out on the ballroom floor. Warm liquid spread down the back of my uniform. Blood, definitely blood, but Theo was alive. That was the only thought cutting through the pain. He was alive. Hands grabbed chunks of fallen metal and glass away from us. Men shouted over each other in clipped, urgent voices. Move back. Check the exits. Get medical now. Then another voice cut through the chaos, so sharply the entire room seemed to freeze around it. Theo. I looked up through blurred vision and saw Lucien Devereaux kneeling beside us. The cold control from earlier was gone, completely gone. His face had lost all color as his eyes scanned his son frantically from head to toe. Theo, he said, his voice cracking this time. Look at me. The little boy lifted his head from my chest. He stared at his father with wide, frightened eyes, but still said nothing. Lucien exhaled once. A rough, shaky breath that looked almost painful. His hands moved over Theo, checking for injuries before his gaze snapped toward me. The expression in his eyes changed when he saw the blood soaking through the back of my uniform. Not panic, but something darker and colder, dangerous in a different way. She covered him, one of the security men said beside him. Lucien studied me for 2 long seconds like he was trying to understand something impossible. Then he reached toward my shoulder. Can you move? He asked. His voice sounded lower now, controlled again, but barely. I tried to answer and winced as pain tore through my back. I think so. Do not try. He stood and turned toward the crowd gathering nearby. Every person around us fell silent the moment he looked at them. Lock every exit, he said calmly, too calmly. Nobody leaves this hotel. A ripple of fear moved through the ballroom. Even the hotel manager looked pale. Sir, emergency services are on the way. Someone stammered nearby. Lucien ignored him. His attention returned to me as he crouched again. Theo still clung tightly to my arm now, his small fingers trembling. What is your name? Lucien asked. Marin. My voice barely came out above a whisper. His eyes held mine. Marin, he repeated, like committing it to memory. Then his gaze dropped to the blood spreading across the marble beneath me. Something dangerous flickered behind his expression again. Find out how that chandelier fell, he said without looking away from me. Now, pain changes the way time moves, seconds stretch, sounds blur together. Faces become shadows swimming beneath bright light. I remember paramedics kneeling beside me on the ballroom floor while people whispered. Somebody kept pressing gauze against my back. Another voice asked me the same questions over and over. Can you breathe? Do you know your name? Can you move your legs? I answered somehow, though every breath felt sharp beneath my ribs. But through all of it, I kept noticing one thing. Lucien Devereaux never left. Most powerful men would have disappeared the second the emergency crews arrived. They would have handed the mess to assistants and security teams while retreating somewhere quiet and expensive. Not him. He stood only a few feet away with Theo beside him, one hand on the boy's shoulder while the other clenched at his side. His suit sleeves still carried streaks of my blood. He never seemed to notice. Sir, we need room, one paramedic said. Lucien looked at the man for a long moment before stepping back one pace, no more than that. Theo still stared at me silently. The child had not said a single word since the chandelier fell. His gray eyes followed every movement around me with frightening intensity, almost like he was waiting for something terrible to happen again. I tried forcing a small smile toward him despite the pain. You are okay, I whispered weakly. His fingers tightened around the sleeve of his father's jacket. Lucien noticed. Of course he noticed. Men like him noticed everything. The paramedics lifted me onto the stretcher, and pain shot across my shoulders so violently I gasped despite myself. The ballroom ceiling spun above me as they wheeled me toward the exit. Crystal glittered across the marble floor everywhere like frozen rain. Guests huddled together whispering nervously while security blocked every doorway. Nobody was leaving. Lucien had made sure of that. We reached the hotel corridor when heavy footsteps approached beside the stretcher. Lucien again. His voice stayed low as he walked beside me. The doctors at St. Vincent are waiting. I blinked at him through the pain. You do not have to do that, I said. His expression hardened. Yes, he said. I do, he said as the elevator doors opened. Theo still stood beside him, clutching the front of his father's coat. The child looked pale beneath the bright hallway lights. I swallowed painfully before looking at him again. Hey, I whispered softly, his eyes lifted toward mine. None of this was your fault. Something changed in his face then, tiny, fragile, but there. Like those words reached someplace nobody else had managed to touch in a long time. Lucien saw it too. I could tell by the way his entire body went still. Then the elevator doors closed between us. The ambulance ride blurred together beneath flashing red lights and sharp waves of pain. A female paramedic cut through the back of my uniform, while another checked the injuries across my shoulders. Mostly cuts and bruising, she said gently. You got lucky. Lucky was a funny word for bleeding across a ballroom floor in front of half of Manhattan. I closed my eyes against the throbbing ache in my back. My phone was still in my apron pocket. My rent was due in 4 days. My little brother was probably waiting for me to bring home groceries after my shift. And somehow my entire life had collided headfirst with Lucien Devereaux in less than 10 minutes. The ambulance doors opened outside St. Vincent Medical Center. Rain had started falling over the city now, cold and steady beneath the hospital lights. But before the paramedics could wheel me inside, another black car pulled sharply into the emergency entrance behind us. Lucien stepped out with Theo beside him. The hospital staff froze the second they recognized him. And for the first time all night, I realized something terrifying. Whatever world that man belonged to, I had just been pulled directly into it. Hospitals after midnight always felt strange to me. Too bright and too quiet in the wrong ways. The emergency room at St. Vincent smelled like antiseptic, coffee, and exhaustion as doctors moved around me beneath harsh fluorescent lights. Somebody cleaned the cuts across my shoulders while another nurse checked for fractures. Every time disinfectant touched my back, pain burned straight through me hard enough to make my fingers grip the hospital sheets. You are lucky, the older doctor repeated while examining another cut near my shoulder blade. A few inches lower, and this could have been much worse. I gave a weak nod, even though my mind was somewhere else entirely, out in the hallway. With the man who had followed my ambulance across Manhattan, like losing sight of me for 5 minutes was unacceptable. Through the partially open curtain, I could see Lucien standing near the nurse's station speaking with one of his security men, tall, still, controlled again. But there was tension in the way his jaw tightened whenever someone mentioned the chandelier. Theo sat nearby in a chair much too large for him, swinging his feet above the floor without making a sound. He still had not spoken once. A nurse walked past carrying paperwork and nearly tripped over herself when Lucien looked up at her. That fear does not come from ordinary money. Miss Vale, the doctor asked gently. Stay awake for me. I blinked quickly. Sorry, you likely have a mild concussion, so we are keeping you overnight for observation. Overnight, my stomach tightened. I cannot afford overnight. The doctor hesitated awkwardly before glancing. Your expenses have been handled. Of course they had. I closed my eyes. Nothing good came free around men like Lucien Devereaux. A few minutes later, the curtain shifted softly. I looked up expecting another nurse, and instead found Lucien stepping alone. The room felt smaller with him in it. He had removed his suit jacket, leaving a black dress shirt rolled at the sleeves. Expensive watch, dark eyes, calm expression. But exhaustion lingered beneath it now, real exhaustion. He looked toward the bandages across my shoulders first before meeting my eyes. How bad is it? He asked. I have had worse shifts. The corner of his mouth almost moved. Almost. Then his expression darkened again. You should not joke right now. I am trying not to panic. That earned me a longer look, not cold this time, studying, careful, like he was trying to understand me. Most people panic around me, he said. I think I am too tired. A strange silence settled between us. Hospital monitors beeped softly somewhere down the hall, while rain tapped against distant windows outside. Lucien moved closer to the bed. Theo would be dead if not for you. The bluntness hit harder than I expected. I swallowed. I just reacted. No. His voice stayed calm. Most people run from danger. You ran toward it. I looked down at the thin hospital blanket across my lap because I did not know what to do with the intensity in his eyes. Men had looked at me with attraction before. Anger too, frustration, hunger, but never this. This looked almost like disbelief. Like he could not understand why a stranger would bleed for his child. You do not even know me, I whispered. I know enough. His phone buzzed sharply in his pocket. The shift in his expression happened the second he checked the screen. Cold again. Dangerous again. What is it? I asked before I could stop myself. He slid the phone away. The chandelier cable was cut. The room went silent around us. Even the rain outside sounded farther away. My heartbeat slowed hard in my chest. "You mean?" I whispered. "It was not an accident." Lucien held my gaze steadily for one heavy second. "And now whoever did it knows you survived too." I did not sleep after Lucien told me the chandelier had been sabotaged. Every small sound inside the hospital made my pulse jump after that. Footsteps outside the room, elevator dings down the hallway. The low murmur of security radios near the nurse's station. By 3 in the morning, St. Vincent no longer felt like a hospital. It felt guarded, watched. I shifted against the pillows, regretting it when pain pulled across my shoulders again. The television mounted in the corner stayed muted while late-night news rolled silently across the screen. The gala incident had made headlines. Wealthy charity event disrupted after chandelier collapse. Multiple injuries reported. No mention of sabotage. No mention of Lucien Devereaux. Men like him did not belong in public headlines unless they wanted to. A quiet knock interrupted my thoughts. Before I answered, the door opened and Theo stepped into the room alone. I blinked in surprise. The little boy wore the same gray sweater from the ballroom, though somebody had draped an oversized black coat around his small shoulders. He looked even younger under the harsh hospital lights, fragile, somehow. "Theo." I pushed myself upright despite the ache in my back. "Are you okay?" He nodded once, but stayed near the doorway, silent, careful. His gray eyes drifted toward the bandages visible above my hospital gown, and guilt crossed his face so openly it nearly broke my heart. "Hey," I whispered softly. "None of this is your fault, remember?" He lowered his gaze. A second later, another figure appeared behind him. Lucien, of course. He leaned one shoulder against the doorframe, watching us both. There was something exhausting about the way that man looked at the world, like he trusted absolutely nothing around him. "He insisted on checking on you himself," Lucien said softly. Theo still refused to come farther into the room. I glanced around before spotting the untouched pudding cup sitting beside my dinner tray. "You want this?" I asked Theo gently. "Hospital pudding is terrible, but it is still technically chocolate." For the first time all night, the corner of Theo's mouth moved, barely there, but real, Lucien noticed. The entire room changed when that tiny expression crossed his son's face. Something inside Lucien softened so it almost hurt to witness. Theo walked closer to the bed in hesitant little steps before taking the pudding cup from my hand. "See," I whispered. "Still edible," I whispered, and another tiny, almost smile appeared. Then the room outside exploded into movement. Fast footsteps thundered down the hallway, followed by raised voices near the nurse's station. Lucien's expression changed. The softness vanished beneath cold focus so quickly it startled me. One of his security men appeared at the doorway, breathing hard. "Sir." Lucien stepped toward him. "What happened?" "Someone entered the west stairwell 15 minutes ago, wearing hospital scrubs. Cameras lost him near this floor." Every muscle in my body tightened beneath the blankets. Lucien glanced toward me once, sharp, calculating, then back to his man. "Seal the floor." Theo moved closer to my bed at the tension in his father's voice. I could feel the fear spreading through the hallway now. Nurses whispering, doors closing, security moving quickly outside. "Lucien," I said. He looked at me. "You think they came here?" Silence answered me first, heavy silence. Then he walked back toward the bed until he stood close enough for me to see the exhaustion in his eyes again beneath all that control. "I think whoever planned tonight failed," he said calmly. "And people who fail around men like that rarely stop after one attempt," he said, and my throat tightened. "I am just a waitress." "No." His voice dropped lower now, more personal somehow. "You are the woman who threw herself in front of falling glass for my son." Theo climbed into the chair beside my bed then, still clutching the pudding cup in both hands. He leaned like he trusted me more than anyone else in that hospital. Lucien watched that small movement for a long silent moment before speaking again. "You are not safe alone anymore." The sun had not even risen when Lucien moved me out of the hospital. One minute a nurse was checking my bandages. The next, 4 men in dark suits were surrounding my room, while hospital administrators stopped arguing about discharge paperwork. Nobody said the word fear out loud. They did not need to. I sat on the edge of the hospital bed, while another wave of pain rolled through my shoulders. "This is insane," I muttered softly. Lucien stood near the window, fastening the cuff of his black dress shirt with calm, precise movements. Like this was part of his normal routine. Staying here is more dangerous. For me or for everyone else? His eyes lifted toward mine. Both. That answer sat heavily in my chest. Outside the room, Theo waited beside one of the guards with a backpack hanging from one shoulder. He looked exhausted. Pale shadows rested beneath his eyes, but the second he noticed me looking at him, he stood straighter like he was trying to prove he was okay. My heart squeezed unexpectedly. I have to call my brother, I said suddenly. He is probably worried sick. Lucien nodded once and handed me a brand new phone from the table beside him. I stared at it in confusion. Where's mine? Security kept it temporarily. Temporarily? Until we confirm nobody tracked it during the gala. I blinked at him. You confiscated my phone. I protected it. That sounds illegal. You are alive enough to argue with me. Good. I should have been furious. Instead, exhaustion dragged against every emotion too heavily to fight anymore. I called my younger brother Caleb while Lucien stepped outside to speak with security. Caleb answered on the second ring. Marin, oh my God, his voice cracked with panic. I saw the news. Are you hurt? I am okay, I whispered quickly. Just some cuts. Some cuts. You disappeared all night. Guilt twisted painfully through me. Caleb was only 19. Too young to sound this tired all the time. I am sorry. I just mean things got complicated. Complicated how? I looked toward the doorway where Lucien stood partially visible in the hall speaking into his phone while Theo sat beside him swinging his feet against the chair. I will explain later, I said softly. Just lock the apartment doors today, okay? Silence. Then Caleb exhaled. Marin, what happened? Before I answered, Lucien glanced toward me sharply. One of his men had just handed him something small in an evidence bag. My stomach tightened at the look on his face, cold, focused, dangerous. He stepped back into the room after I ended the call. What now? I asked. Lucien held up the evidence bag between two fingers. Inside rested a small brass screw stained dark with grease. This was recovered from the chandelier support beam. And it was loosened manually, he said, and the room felt colder. So somebody planned all of it. Yes, his voice remained calm, too calm. And they knew where Theo would be standing. Theo looked up at the sound of his name, but stayed silent. Lucien's expression shifted the moment he saw his son watching him, softer, briefly, then gone again. We are leaving, he said. 20 minutes later, Manhattan blurred outside the tinted windows of a black sport utility vehicle while rain streaked across the glass. I sat in the back seat trying not to move my shoulders while Theo sat beside me clutching a small dinosaur toy somebody had apparently brought him overnight. The penthouse looked less like an apartment and more like a fortress suspended above Manhattan. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the gray morning skyline, while rain rolled softly down the glass 70 stories above the streets below. Everything inside felt expensive in a quiet, intimidating way. Black marble floors, soft recessed lighting. Furniture so perfectly arranged it looked untouched by ordinary life. I stood near the entrance trying not to wince from the pain in my shoulders, while one of Lucien's staff members carried my small overnight bag down the hallway. You did not have to bring me here, I said. Lucien removed his coat near the living room without looking at me. You cannot return to your apartment. People survive in Brooklyn every day without armed security. Not after becoming connected to me. That answer settled heavily in the room. Theo walked beside me holding the dinosaur toy I had returned to him in the car. He still stayed close enough that his small shoulder occasionally brushed my arm while we crossed the penthouse together. Like he had decided I belonged near him. A woman in her 50s appeared from the kitchen wearing a charcoal gray dress and a warm expression that softened the tension in the room. Miss Vale, she said gently. I am Evelyn, and I help manage the household. Household sounded far too normal for the kind of life surrounding Lucien Devereaux. I prepared the guest suite for you. Evelyn continued kindly. And breakfast if you can eat. I realized I had not eaten since before the gala. My stomach tightened painfully at the thought of food. Thank you. Lucien checked his watch before turning toward one of the guards stationed near the entrance. Double security on every elevator. Already done, sir. Nobody enters this floor without clearance from me personally. Yes, sir. I watched the entire exchange. Nobody questioned him or hesitated. The room bent around whatever Lucien decided. It should have terrified me more than it did. Instead, exhaustion dragged too heavily against my thoughts. Theo tugged lightly against the sleeve of my borrowed sweatshirt, then pointed toward the kitchen. "You want me to come eat with you?" I asked softly. He nodded. Lucien froze halfway through removing his watch. The reaction lasted only a second, but I noticed it. So did Evelyn. The older woman quickly hid a small smile before turning back toward the kitchen. Theo had not spoken in front of me yet, but apparently this much interaction alone meant something enormous. Breakfast felt strangely normal considering armed guards stood outside every hallway. Theo sat beside me eating dry cereal while I picked at toast and coffee across from him. The rain outside softened the city into silver shadows beyond the windows. For almost 5 quiet minutes, nobody spoke. Then Theo pushed a small folded napkin toward me. I unfolded it. A child's drawing stared back at me in uneven blue crayon lines. Me. Curled around him beneath falling glass, my throat tightened. "Theo," I whispered. He lowered his gaze quickly like he regretted showing me. "It is beautiful," I whispered softly. "Thank you." Lucien stood near the kitchen entrance watching us both silently. There was something unreadable in his face now. Not suspicion or control, but something heavier, almost haunted. His phone buzzed sharply against the marble counter beside him. The shift happened the second he answered. Cold focus returned to every inch of him. "Say that again," he said into the phone. Silence stretched across the kitchen. Theo stopped eating. Even Evelyn looked tense now. Lucien listened for several more seconds before ending the call without another word. "What happened?" I asked as his eyes lifted toward mine. "The hotel security footage from before the chandelier collapsed disappeared this morning," he said, and my stomach dropped. "Deleted. Professionally erased." Theo moved his chair closer beside mine. Lucien noticed. His jaw tightened once before he looked back at me again. "Whoever planned this is inside my organization," he said. "Which means they know where you are now." By the second night inside Lucien Devereaux's penthouse, I realized silence could feel more dangerous than shouting. The place stayed unnaturally quiet despite the number of people constantly moving through it. Guards rotated shifts near the elevators. Men in tailored suits entered Lucien's office carrying folders and left looking tense. Phones rang softly behind closed doors for hours. But nobody ever raised their voice. Nobody relaxed either. Rain continued falling over Manhattan outside the windows while the city lights blurred beneath low clouds. I stood near the kitchen island pouring myself water when I noticed Theo sitting alone in the living room floor surrounded by crayons and paper. He looked so small against the enormous penthouse windows behind him. A child trapped inside secrets and fear. "What are you drawing?" I asked softly while lowering myself onto the couch nearby. Theo hesitated before turning the paper toward me. My chest tightened. He had drawn the chandelier again. Only this time, there was another figure hidden near the top corner of the page, tall, standing above the ballroom balcony, watching. I frowned. "Who is that?" Theo's fingers tightened around the blue crayon. His eyes shifted nervously leading to Lucien's office, then back to the drawing. Before he answered, footsteps approached behind us. Lucien entered the living room, still holding his phone against one ear. His dark expression looked even colder than usual tonight. "Double the security downstairs," he said into the phone. "Nobody leaves until I say otherwise." He ended the call and noticed the drawing in Theo's hands. "What is that?" Theo went still. I watched the tiny wall slam back into place across the child's face so fast it hurt to see. Lucien noticed too. Regret flickered across his expression before disappearing again beneath exhaustion. He was showing me his drawing. I said gently. Lucien stepped closer. Theo lowered his gaze toward the paper, but did not hide it. That alone seemed to surprise his father. Lucien crouched in front of him. "You drew the balcony," he said. Theo nodded once. "Did you see someone up there?" Theo's breathing changed, faster now, uneven. His small hand gripped the crayon so tightly his knuckles turned white. Lucien's face hardened. "Theo." The little boy dropped the crayon and climbed off the floor, moving straight toward me instead. He pressed himself tightly against my side with his face buried near my arm. My heart broke a little. Lucien stayed frozen where he crouched for one long, painful second before standing again. "I should not have pushed him," he muttered. It was the first real mistake I had heard him admit. I rested one hand lightly against Theo's hair. "He is scared." Lucien looked toward the rainy windows instead of answering. So am I. The honesty in those 3 words stunned me. Before I responded, shouting erupted somewhere down the hallway. Fast footsteps followed soon after. One of Lucien's guards appeared moments later, breathing hard. Sir. Lucien turned. What happened? We found one of the surveillance technicians downstairs trying to erase building footage. Every trace of warmth vanished from the room. Where is he now? Secured. Lucien's jaw tightened sharply. Did he say who ordered it? No, sir, but he had this. The guard handed him a folded piece of paper. Lucien opened it once. His expression changed. Dangerous, focused, controlled in the scariest possible way. What is it? I asked. He looked at me for a long second before answering. An address. For what? A warehouse in Red Hook. Theo looked up at his father then. Something terrified flickered across the child's face the moment he heard those words. Lucien noticed. Theo. The little boy's lips parted. His voice came out rough and barely audible from disuse. The man from the balcony. He whispered. The entire penthouse fell silent. Lucien looked at his son like the world had stopped moving around him. Theo swallowed hard before speaking again. He went there after the lights broke. Everything changed after Theo spoke. The penthouse stayed silent for several seconds after those quiet, trembling words left his mouth. Even the rain outside seemed to disappear beneath the weight of it. Lucien looked at his son like he had forgotten how to breathe. Theo lowered his eyes afterward, almost like he regretted speaking. But it was too late now. The silence had broken. Lucien crouched in front of him again, this time moving like approaching something fragile enough to shatter. Theo, he said, look at me. The little boy hesitated before lifting his gaze. I saw something in Lucien's face then that no amount of money or power could hide. Fear. Real fear. Not for himself, but for his child. You saw the man? Lucien asked softly, and Theo nodded once. At the balcony? Theo nodded again as Lucien swallowed. Why did you not tell me before? Theo's fingers tightened around the fabric of my sleeve. His answer came so I almost missed it. You were angry all the time. The words hit the room harder than any scream could have. Lucien froze. I looked away instinctively because this no longer felt like something I was supposed to witness. A father realizing his son had been too afraid to speak. Lucien lowered his head before standing again. When he looked back up, every trace of emotion had disappeared beneath cold control. But now I understood something important. The control existed because without it, he might break apart. Prepare the cars, he ordered one of the guards. We leave in 10 minutes. My stomach dropped. You are going there now. Yes. Lucien, if someone set a trap dash, then I walk into it prepared. He turned toward me afterward, his expression softening only. You stay here. Absolutely not. The answer came out before I could stop it. Lucien blinked once in surprise. Marin, Theo trusted me enough to speak. And if you leave him here terrified while you disappear into danger, he will shut down again. Lucien stared at me silently. Theo moved closer beside me at the tension rising in the room. Finally, Lucien exhaled through his nose. You make my life significantly harder. You are welcome. To my shock, the corner of his mouth actually moved, not a full smile, but close. 20 minutes later, we crossed Lower Manhattan beneath heavy rain inside a convoy of black vehicles. Theo sat between Lucien and me in the back seat, wrapped in a gray blanket, while city lights streaked across the wet windows outside. Nobody spoke much during the drive. The closer we got to Red Hook, the more tension filled the vehicle. I could feel it in the silence. In the way the guards checked their radios constantly. In the way Lucien watched every passing street through narrowed eyes. The warehouse appeared near the waterfront, surrounded by abandoned shipping containers and rusted fencing. Rain hammered against the roof of our vehicle as the convoy stopped. Stay inside the vehicle, Lucien ordered before stepping out into the storm. Men moved quickly around him beneath the flashing reflections of harbor lights. Theo watched his father through the glass without blinking once. Minutes stretched endlessly. Then headlights appeared near the far side of the warehouse lot. Another vehicle speeding away, guards shouted. More black vehicles accelerated after it through the rain-soaked docks. Theo flinched hard beside me. Hey, I whispered softly, turning toward him. It is okay. His breathing came fast now, panicked. I instinctively reached for his hand. Look at me, Theo. Slowly, his gray eyes lifted toward mine. Breathe with me. Outside, rain pounded against steel and concrete, while distant harbor horns echoed across the water. Theo's small fingers tightened around mine. Then the back door opened suddenly. Lucien stepped inside, soaked from the storm, breathing hard, rain dripping from his dark hair onto his black coat. He looked straight at Theo first, always Theo first. "It is over," he said. The tension inside Theo cracked. Theo launched forward suddenly, wrapping both arms around his father's neck. Lucien froze in complete shock before holding him back, like something precious had returned to him after years lost. I looked away toward the rain-streaked windows because my chest hurt in a different way now. After a long moment, Lucien lifted his eyes toward me over Theo's shoulder. There was no coldness left in them anymore. Only something deep and unguarded that made my heartbeat stumble. "You protected my son," he said. "And somehow, you brought him back to me too."